Breaking, Venezuelan subs fired near the wrong U.S. carrier, USS Gerald R. near war.
At 4:32 a.m. in the Caribbean, the sea looked calm, but two unknown contacts were moving under the surface toward a US carrier group. On the destroyer's sonar screen, a thin line appeared, slow but steady, coming from the south at 4 knots and only 9 miles away. A second line followed the same path. These were submarines. The danger came from a bad assumption. Venezuela believed they were tracking one small US ship. They had no idea they were closing in on the USS Gerald R. and her escorts. One side thought it was watching a single vessel. The other side saw a possible hostile move unfolding. Alarms hit fast. The destroyer lowered speed to clean the sonar picture. Voices tightened as operators marked both contacts. Nothing about this approach looked accidental. This was not routine. This was tension moving in the wrong direction, and the submarines below had no idea they had targeted the wrong force. If you want to follow this moment as it unfolds, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. What happened on the water that morning was not just a close call. It exposed how fast tension between the US and Venezuela can turn into something much larger. The area where it happened is one of the busiest and most sensitive stretches of water in the Caribbean. It is a narrow space where patrol planes, drug interdiction missions, cargo routes, and military units move every day. Because of that, every misunderstanding carries real weight. For the US Navy, the carrier group was following a normal transit path. These routes support counter-drug operations, protect shipping lanes, and keep a steady presence in the region. Nothing about the mission was unusual. But from the other side of the radar screen, Venezuela saw something very different. Their older coastal sensors had turned a full carrier strike group into what looked like one oversized ship sailing alone. That is not typical behavior for the US, and it made the situation feel suspicious from the start. Inside Venezuela's command rooms, the thought grew that the US might be testing their response time. They believed a single ship near the boundary was trying to see how they would react. That belief pushed them to act quietly but firmly. They sent 2 submarines to get close, observe, and signal strength without crossing into open conflict. They expected a small ship, not the Gerald R. and multiple escorts. For the sailors on the US side, this was not just another watch shift. Anytime a submarine appears near a carrier, every second counts. A torpedo fired in warning sounds exactly like a torpedo fired to kill. There is no difference on sonar. That is why the first moments matter so much. A wrong move, a slow decision, or a misread sound can put thousands of sailors at risk. This incident matters because it shows how easily 2 countries can drift into danger without meaning to. One side followed a normal route, the other followed a bad radar picture. And somewhere in the middle, both sides came close to a moment that could have changed the entire region. It reminds everyone how fragile these situations are and how fast a simple error can turn into something far more serious. If you think the US acted correctly, press 1. If you believe Venezuela pushed the region into unnecessary danger, press 9 and hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Gravely, everything was calm until a thin line appeared on the sonar display. The operator leaned in, adjusting his headset. The sound was steady and mechanical. He marked the bearing, and the room's mood changed instantly. The ship lowered speed to cut its own noise. The towed array behind the destroyer soon picked up a second signal on the same path. 2 contacts moving together meant intent. Before anyone said it out loud, everyone understood something was coming. Then the sound hit. A sharp burst struck the sonar feed. The operator recognized it at once. A torpedo launch. "Torpedo in the water!" he shouted. The CIC jumped into action. Doors locked. Crew strapped in. Screens switched to combat tracking. Training took over fast. The alert reached the USS Gerald R. within seconds. The carrier shifted course to slide away from the projected path, while her escorts widened their formation to shield her. Every move was clean and practiced. A torpedo threat leaves no room for delay. On the flight deck, the MH-60R Seahawk crew rushed into the aircraft. The weapons tech called out, "MK-54 ready." The pilot felt his pulse jump not from fear, but from knowing this moment was real. In sonar, the operator followed the weapon's run. It moved like a short-range shot, but that didn't matter. A torpedo is still a torpedo. The pitch changed, rising fast. Then the blast came. The ship didn't shake hard, but everyone felt the pressure wave roll across the hull. The sonar screen flashed white. To the system, it looked exactly like a torpedo finishing an attack run. The fact it was programmed to self-destruct didn't change the sound. Inside the CIC, the order to fire back hovered in the air. The watch officer raised his hand, then held it. Hold 3 seconds. The room fell silent. Everyone waited for a second torpedo, any sign of a follow-up attack. None appeared. The sonar chief finally said, "Detonated at preset range, no follow-up." A quiet breath moved through the room. Across the formation, ships stayed alert. The Seahawk held its position. The destroyers kept tight spacing. No one assumed the danger was over, but everyone understood the same truth. A single wrong decision could have changed the entire region before sunrise. Even after the torpedo self-destructed, the strike group did not relax. In close conflict, silence can feel worse than noise. The ocean around them was too still. On the USS Gravely, the sonar display slowly cleared from the blast. The operator leaned closer, trying to separate ocean noise from anything that might be moving. A faint trace appeared, weaker than before. "Movement decreasing," he said. The contact was slowing down, but no one knew if it meant retreat or preparation. No one wanted to assume the safer answer. Across the formation, defenses tightened. Another destroyer dropped new decoys, loud enough to confuse any second weapon. The cruiser shifted a few degrees to get a cleaner angle if it had to fire. In underwater defense, even small heading changes can shape what sensors hear. For a moment, the ocean sounded empty. No spikes, no engine tones, only waves. But quiet does not mean safe. Quiet only means the next noise could change everything. Above the formation, the MH-60R Seahawk flew a wide loop and dropped sonobuoys in a pattern. Each buoy sent quick updates back. Buoy 3, faint contact. Not enough to confirm, but enough to keep tension high. Inside the carrier's combat center, officers reviewed the timeline. 1 torpedo, 1 explosion, no follow-up. One officer said it looked like a warning. Another said warnings don't come near a carrier. Both were right, which made the next step harder. Under the surface, the Venezuelan submarines were finally understanding their mistake. The sounds above them were not from one ship, they were from a full carrier group. They turned deeper, slipping below the thermocline to hide their noise. Their trail faded into broken echoes. The Gravely followed them for several minutes, but the signals weakened until they disappeared. Losing a submarine's trail never feels like safety. It feels like something dangerous just stepped out of sight. The formation held steady, engines stayed quiet, weapons stayed ready. No one spoke unless necessary. The torpedo was gone, but the danger wasn't. A simple radar error had pushed both sides into a place neither intended, and everyone knew the next move could decide how far this would go. The twist in this incident did not come from the submarines. It came from the reason they were sent. As us analysts reviewed recent intelligence, something clear appeared. For almost 2 days, Venezuela's old coastal radars had been showing one large target near their boundary. It flickered in and out through weather interference, and each time it looked like a single oversized ship moving alone. In reality, it was the entire carrier strike group sailing in tight formation. Old radar systems often merge close reflections into one. That simple flaw changed everything. Venezuela believed the US was pushing a lone ship close to their waters, maybe to test their reaction. They answered with a controlled move, sending 2 submarines to get close and show they were watching. But under emission control, the submarines could not verify what they were approaching. They relied only on the old radar picture and the noise above the water. Several ships making layered sounds can easily seem like one vessel preparing for routine activity. To them, nothing felt unusual. Meanwhile, the US had no idea Venezuela was seeing a distorted image. From the carrier group's point of view, their transit was normal. The sudden approach of two submarines and the launch of a torpedo felt like a serious challenge. Both sides believed the other was sending a message. In reality, both were reacting to bad information. After the explosion, the Venezuelan crews finally understood the truth. The noise above them was too large and too organized to be one ship. They had moved directly under a full carrier group without knowing it. And on the US side, those 3 seconds of restraint revealed their own twist. The torpedo was not part of a real attack. It was a warning shot based on old data and a wrong assumption. It was a moment where misunderstanding pushed two nations dangerously close to something neither wanted. The real climax was not the explosion. It was the moment after, when the strike group had to decide whether to fire back. Inside the Gerald R. Ford's combat center, the tension felt heavy. The report replayed through the speakers. Torpedo detonation. No second signature yet. That single word "yet" kept everyone on edge. The carrier continued sliding away from the predicted path while her escorts held a wide shield around her. Radar and sonar teams stayed locked in, eyes fixed on every line that moved. Nobody looked away. Above the water, the MH-60R Seahawk hovered and lowered its dipping sonar. The operator waited for the ocean to settle. "No chase tone," he said softly. No one celebrated. Quiet didn't mean safe. On the Gravely, the sonar operator listened for the sound everyone feared: a second torpedo. A real strike would come fast. But the screen stayed calm, almost too calm. In the combat center, the watch officer stood with his hand raised, ready to give the order that would change everything. He studied the data again. One torpedo, no follow-up. A strange pattern for a real attack. After a brief pause, he gave the most important command of the night. "Hold position." The ship stayed in full combat posture, engines steady, weapons armed. The crew didn't relax, they waited. Seconds felt long, even the hum of electronics sounded sharper. Finally, the sonar chief broke the silence. No second weapon, no pursuit. It was the first true sign of relief, though no one lowered their guard. The Seahawk widened its search loop. The destroyers kept their spacing tight. The cruisers stayed angled for a shot. Then the pattern became clear. The submarines were leaving. Their signals grew weaker as they slipped deeper and farther away. The screen slowly emptied. No cheers followed. Everyone understood what had just been avoided. They had been one decision away from firing back, one order from turning a misunderstanding into a regional crisis. The danger faded, but the weight of what almost happened stayed with every sailor in the room. When the ocean settled and the submarine signals faded, the strike group returned to steady formation. No one celebrated. This wasn't a win, it was a warning shaped by old radar data, wrong assumptions, and seconds of pressure that could have changed the region. In the short term, nothing was hit and no one was hurt. But the long-term impact ran much deeper. The US Navy saw how quickly a routine transit could turn into a real crisis. A simple radar glitch inside Venezuela's system made a full carrier group look like one large ship. That mistake pushed two submarines directly toward the Gerald R. Ford. It proved how easily a small error can place thousands of sailors at risk. For Venezuela, the incident revealed another problem. Their aging radar network created a ghost target. Their submarines acted on data that wasn't true, and by the time they understood what they had approached, they were already beneath a powerful formation prepared to defend itself. A single warning shot had nearly sparked a response they could not control. Across the region, Allied commanders took note. If a mistaken torpedo could trigger combat posture, what would a real one do? And how fast would the US react the next time something like this happens? It showed that danger often comes not from intent, but from confusion and timing. Inside the Gerald R. Ford's combat center, the final report highlighted the 3-second hold. That short pause likely stopped a wider conflict. It was quiet, almost invisible, but it kept two nations from stepping into something neither wanted. Still, no one believes the risk is gone. The Caribbean is crowded, busy, and politically tense. One more radar failure or misunderstood signal could start the same chain again, and the next time, those precious seconds might not be there. If you think the US made the right call, press 1. If you believe Venezuela pushed the region too far, press 9 and hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.